Hubris, the fall of General Edward Braddock. In the midst of the American wilderness, a conflict brewed that would reshape the continent. It was called the French and Indian War, a battle for control over North America that pitted British forces against the French and their Native American allies. At the center of the struggle was one man, General Edward Braddock. Born in 1695 in London, England, Edward Braddock was a seasoned soldier. He had served in the War of the Austrian Succession. He had quickly rose to the ranks, known for his discipline and strategic acumen. In 1755, he was appointed by King George III to command British forces in the American colonies. He was tasked with one crucial mission. He was to capture Fort Duquesne, a French stronghold at the confluence of the Ohio River. Braddock assembled a force of nearly 1,500 troops, including British regulars, colonial militia, and Native American allies. As they marched through the dense forests of Virginia, Maryland, and what was to become Pennsylvania, Braddock's confidence was unshaken. He believed in the superiority of the tried and tested English military tactics he had drilled into his men to overcome any problems with the unfamiliar terrain. In order to make the march from his headquarters at Alexandria in the Virginia colony, Braddock ordered his men to build military roads through the wilderness. Stretches of this road still exist to this very day, and at one point made up the first highway in the United States. The area and this road were very familiar to Braddock's aide, George Washington. He had surveyed and laid out much of this route and had used it during his ill fated diplomatic mission at Great Meadow, an incident in which many ways led to this very war being touched off. Since Washington didn't read French, he had unwittingly signed a murder confession for the death of a French emissary at the hands of an unpaid Indian scout under his command. Which brings us to July 9th, 1755. After months of preparation and marching, Braddock's forces finally were approaching Fort Duquesne. However, unbeknownst to them, a combined force of French troops and Native American warriors lay in wait, having anticipated their arrival for weeks. As Braddock's men emerged from the woods, they were met with a fierce ambush. The well trained British forces, unaccustomed to guerrilla warfare, faltered. Braddock's insistence on maintaining traditional formations made them easy targets and led to high casualties. During all the chaos, Braddock was struck by a bullet and fell mortally wounded. Under fire, and with most of the British officers rendered unable to command, George Washington, who had been disrespected as being a colonial, took over and organized an orderly retreat, evacuating the general and the rest of the surviving force from the battlefield. Braddock, though gravely injured, displayed remarkable resilience. As he was transported away from the battlefield, he uttered prophetic words, lamenting the loss of his men and the failure of his mission. On July 13th, 1755, just days after the ambush, General Edward Braddock succumbed to his wounds. He was 60 years old. Braddock was buried in a grave on the path that he had taken, his body interred in the wilderness he had sought to conquer. Legend has it that his soldiers, in order to protect his remains and to disguise his grave, rode over it, forever linking his spirit to the land. Braddock's body laid undisturbed until the early 1800s, when a road crew discovered it while improving the road. As was the fashion in those days, his body was desecrated and parts were taken for morbid souvenirs. It is rumored that a finger was on display at P.T. Barnum's Museum in New York when it burned down in 1865, and the U.S. Army Medical Center at Walter Reed has a piece of his spine in their bone collection. The rest of his body was moved and reinterred at a more suitable location on a hill overlooking the road. General Braddock's campaign and his tragic demise served as a stark lesson for the British military. It underscored the need for new strategies in the face of unconventional warfare. His legacy would pave the way for future military leaders, including his friend George Washington, who would learn from his mistakes. The story of General Edward Braddock is one of hubris and arrogance in the face of a changing reality. He was among the most experienced and well trained soldiers on Earth, the commander of one of the most powerful armies on the planet, and yet he was routed by a handful of men who better used their terrain and cover to their advantage. Thanks for watching Hometown History. Like and subscribe.